This is Victor Uniform 2 Alpha Zulu Kilo. Name is Kishore. I'm back with another video on making your own lithium iron phosphate battery pack. In this video, we shall discuss battery safety, preparing your cells to be part of a battery pack, and also a method of balancing the state of charge of all the cells in the battery pack. Let's talk about battery safety. So this particular lithium iron phosphate battery is rated at 100 Ah and can deliver huge amounts of current. So it is a good practice to tape up those terminals which you would not be working on. So this is the positive and this is the negative terminal. These are all connected in parallel, and I will talk about the reason for doing so. So if you are, let's say, putting a screw on these terminals here, it is best to tape up the other side. And once you're done with making whatever connections you want on these terminals, and now you want to start working here, tape up this side. And then you can remove the tape on this side and start working on it. The reason is very simple. At any stage, you are not exposing the positive and negative terminals simultaneously. And make sure that you're working on this battery with full focus and that there are no pets or children around you when you're working on these batteries. Again, if you were to use this tool to fix screws on the terminals and by mistake you drop it and the tool makes contact with the positive and negative terminals, there would be a massive flash. And because of that flash and high temperature generated at the terminals, there would be molten metal that is flung around in all directions. So it is best that you wear eye protection when you're working with these high capacity batteries, and gloves preferably, but of course you may not have that feedback when you're working with small screws or small terminals. But in any case, you got to be extremely careful and you got to be very alert with these kinds of batteries. And once you have put together all the wires and connectors, make sure you're taping up the positive terminal and the negative terminals of the final battery pack before you attach it to your BMS. Now let's talk about preparing the battery cells for the battery pack. These batteries are fresh from the factory and are less than 6 months old. That means they've been sitting outside for less than 6 months without any charge or discharge cycles. So my recommendation is don't buy batteries that are older than 6 months or 7 months, because then the battery life would be shorter because of formation of dendrites inside the battery pack. So one of the first things you would do is make a compression fixture like this one. So these are 6 mm acrylic plates that I have laser cut, and you can see some of these screws here, long screws with nuts at the nuts and washers at the ends. So these have been drilled into a U-shaped cut here, so that I can just insert the screw and the fasteners together and start tightening these screws on both ends. So there's 4 sets of these on both the directions, on both the sides of the battery, and this holds both the plates together and also compresses these batteries. The reason for this is when lithium iron phosphate batteries are charged, and as they get towards the full state of charge at a voltage of about 3.64 to 3.65 volts, these batteries tend to expand. So the expansion can be as high as 0.5 mm. So if this expansion is just left like that, it could come down to some extent when the battery starts discharging. But the manufacturer's recommendation is that a certain amount of force is to be applied on the sides of the battery so that the compression is possible, and this expansion of about zero 0.5 to zero 0.6 millimeters for each battery is stopped. So this results in a higher battery life. So these batteries typically coming from the factory, and if they're authentic grade A batteries, these would have a life of about 3,500 to 4,000 cycles. That means if you were to charge and discharge these batteries every day, that means get it up to full 100% state of charge, and then discharge it to 0% state of charge. That is one cycle. So if this would last 4,000 days, so you can imagine the life of these batteries, and that's quite a bit. And definitely, if you see the cost of ownership over a period of time, then this is cheaper than lead acid batteries of equivalent capacity. Now, with compression fixtures, if you are able to control the expansion of the cells, then these cells give you at least another 30% additional life. This is what some of the manufacturer specifications and documentation say. So I've decided to go with this fixture. Now this is compressed, and the compression technique is also very complex, but I've used this simple technique with screws and washers, and this is nuts. Now, a lot of people use springs to compress the battery so that as the battery expands, the spring force would increase, and when the battery contracts, then the spring force would decrease. That's a very complicated fixture. I decided to go with this one. The next step is to balance all these batteries. So by balancing, what I mean is to bring all these four cells to the same state of charge. This is essential before you fit this as a battery pack and attach your BMS. So let's say if one of your batteries is having a slightly lower state of charge, which would mean a slightly lower voltage than the other batteries. So when you put all these in series and connect it to your BMS and start the charging cycle, the other batteries which are at a higher state of charge would reach the full state of charge and a full voltage much before the other battery which is at a lower state of charge. So what this would do mean is the BMS would then shut off any further charging, which means that two or three of these cells would reach full state of charge, and the other one or two cells would be lesser than this full state of charge and at a lower voltage. So you would not get the full capacity of the batteries. So this would reduce the life of the other two batteries as well. So it is very essential that you balance these batteries. Now there's two techniques to balance lithium iron phosphate batteries. One is a top balance and another one is bottom balance. The bottom balancing is about discharging all these cells together so that they all reach a zero state of charge. And after that, you can attach your BMS and continue full charging. That is one method. Top balancing is the other method in which you would bring all these cells into the same state of charge, and they would all be at the same voltage with maybe minor differences in about a few millivolts. So I chose the top balancing method, and for that I'm using this bench power supply that is rated at 30 volts 10 amps, and this DC fuse in the middle. So I would connect all these batteries in parallel, all positive terminals on one side, all negative terminals in one side. You would put them all in parallel, connect the positive of the battery to the positive side of the positive terminal of the bench power supply, the negative one to the negative terminal. And on the positive lead, I would have this circuit breaker in the middle, just in case some of the inbuilt protections inside the bench power supply fail. There would not be a mad rush of current from the battery into the bench power supply. So this is rated about 80-85 watts. So this would immediately cut off if it sees that kind of a current. Just one more protection circuit that would help you keep your property safe in case there is an internal short circuit within the bench power supply. So you would set the bench power supply to about 3.65 volts, and this is the full state of charge voltage. And you would crank up the ampere knob to the full extent and then let it charge. So in my case, the entire battery pack took about 38 to 40 hours to come to full state of charge in this manner. And when it reaches the full state of charge, the amps that would be passing through the terminals would come down to a few millivolts. So it can go to the full extent of 10 amps that this bench power supply is capable of when you started the balancing. And over many hours, let's say about after 36 hours or so, in my case, it started dropping to 2 amps, 1 amp, and finally down to a few milliamps. So when it comes down to a few milliamps, then you know that the battery state of charge is very high or almost full, and you can't put in any more amps into it. So that is when you stop the entire process and you disconnect the batteries, and then you move on to the next stage. So this is an essential part of preparing your batteries, and I would suggest anyone not to miss this step. You may think that your BMS will do the complete charging, and it is possible that your BMS may have active balancing built into it as a feature. Mine does, but I'm not depending on it to do the active balancing because it would take a very long time. So let's say once you've balanced it and balanced all these cells, and you have made your pack and installed it into your battery box, and it's now ready for usage. Every 3 months to 4 months, it is better that you check the state of charge of each of these batteries, and if required, you have to again balance them. So this is one additional step compared to lead acid batteries that you need to take in the case of lithium iron phosphate, and this is essential to maintain battery life. You will find a few other videos on lithium iron phosphate batteries on my channel. The description has more details, and subscribe and click the bell icon to get more notifications of new videos that I keep adding from time to time. So with that, 73, and enjoy operating in the outdoors.